I think we all know there's something terribly wrong with the Snow White live-action remake. In fact, there's many things wrong. Rachel Zegler's off-putting personality and politics, being obnoxious as hell.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
The injection of woke social commentary retrofitted into the lore of the story, the addition of creepy, thought we were past this, circa 2005 Robert Zemeckis style CGI dwarves, the lack of originality overall, Gal Gadot's obnoxious politics, the fact Rachel Zegler isn't white, the fact Snow White's name is now about being born a blizzard, and not to mention the apparent disdain for traditional romance inherent to the original story itself, calling the prince creepy and weird. There's many things we can point to, but I think we can all agree and call this what it is. An unmitigated, tone-deaf disaster. But what's the real reason why this movie is a flop with audiences before it's even come out? How did this movie fail before it's even had a chance to launch? What lessons did Disney walk away with their previous live-action remakes? Well, I think it will all become clear when I illustrate how we got to this point. Let's start with Alice in Wonderland, 2010. Arguably Disney's first real foray into unfaithful live-action remakes. What was the takeaway from that movie for Disney? They could make something that's not really at all faithful to the original, put in a ton of ill-fitting CGI, and still make a buttload of money. Oz, the Great and Powerful, 2013. Not technically a Disney remake, but still. It played by essentially the same rules as the Alice remake and still made bank. Nobody talks about it because, well, it's not a very good film. It feels fake and artificial. Maleficent, 2014. They learned they could put a famous actress in the movie and cast her as the villain. And this is right around the time when villain arcs in movies started to become popular and would soon predict the likes of the Cruella remake down the road. Cinderella, 2015. A moderate success, but this is really when the feminist undertones started to creep into Disney's repertoire of cinematic expression. I think this is what they thought the audience at the time wanted, and to be fair, that's probably when feminism reached its peak of popularity in our current pop culture-laden, social media-heavy cluster of a society. So, no fault on them for trying to give the people what they seemingly wanted. Disney is still a business after all, and businesses must keep up with the trends in order to survive in the long run. Jungle Book, 2016. A smash hit. This is when Disney really should have looked at things objectively and made a decision. This was the crucial junction point where Disney could either go down one road or another road.
My shoulder angel.
Don't listen to that guy. He's trying to lead you down the path of righteousness. I'm gonna lead you down the path that rocks.
I'll come off it.
You come off it.
You.
I think we all know what choice they ended up making. At around this time, Disney could really do no wrong. At this time, plans for a remake of 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs were confirmed in October 2016, with Mark Webb of 500 Days of Summer fame set to direct. Alice, Through the Looking Glass, 2016. A middling success in the States, but where it really sizzled was overseas and still drew in a large profit overall. I think this is when Disney wanted to course correct a bit and hedge their bets a bit more on the safe side, as gambling on a domestic hit probably wasn't the best idea. Pete's Dragon, 2016. Did anyone even see this movie? I don't know what Disney learned from this film, but obviously nothing since they would go on to make Dumbo a couple years later. Beauty and the Beast, 2017. Made over $1 billion. This is when Disney hit its peak and realized something that could not be denied. Modern-day live-action remakes of their hit nostalgic 90s animated films were box office gold. 2019 saw 4 Disney remakes. Yes, 4. First, Tim Burton's Dumbo, March 2019, which was a middling success. I think this is where the personal touch of Disney films started to get lost in the shuffle a bit. They were hiring all these modern film directors with a clear voice to direct films that were, well, ill-fitting. They were just getting started though. Next up, Guy Ritchie's Aladdin, May 2019, which made $1 billion. Perhaps it was pre-slap Will Smith or the dazzling aura of the film that, no matter how unfaithful to the original it was, it managed to really sell well to audiences. I think it's the fact the film has such an inoffensive sensibility to it that managed to be a successful popcorn flick for people. But speaking as a huge fan of the original, it left a lot to be desired. The Lion King, the big one, July 2019. This one made close to $2 billion worldwide. You can't really get much better than that. The Lion King is basically a modern retelling of Hamlet, but in animated form. The Lion King was such a big hit in the 90s that it essentially cemented Disney's reign in pop culture history forever. That's really the only reason this film did so well, apart from it being a pretty faithful remake. At this point, Disney learned that going the safe route was the best option for them. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, October 2019. One for the Halloween season, this one did alright, but really not any better than Dumbo. It seems like villain arcs were out and the fad died rather quickly, but sequels usually never do as good as their original films. So moving on. Mulan, 2020. What's funny about this film is that it was a box office bomb and it really says a lot. It unequivocally marks the end of what I'll term the woke era for Disney. Here we have a female heroine straight out of Chinese folklore. A woke goddess and all the representation you can handle, and people spat it out like sour milk. This is when Disney really should have pulled out, but here we are. Now we move forward a couple years later, Cruella, 2021. This is when Disney finally learned villain arcs were officially out, and not even Emma Stone could save them. The film did okay, but really nothing to brag about. A few years later in 2022, we got Pinocchio, a soulless flop nobody asked for, and that's really the problem with a lot of these remakes. It just feels like a cash grab with no real artistic voice behind them. People were starting to see through the veil. 2023, Peter Pan, which I don't think anybody saw. But with The Little Mermaid, I think Disney was really starting to show how tone-deaf they were to what people really wanted. It was blatantly messing with people's expectations of a live-action remake with their stunt casting, and this is where the shit officially hit the fan. People were tired of woke messaging in their Disney movies. They wanted traditional fairy tales with zero political bent to them. You know, like a movie. At this point, Disney was already knee-deep in their Snow White remake, and it was practically finished. Disney cast a diverse cast of people of heights, genders, and creeds as the Seven Dwarfs, and somebody somewhere must have pulled the lever. Somebody must have pushed the button and yelled out, "No more woke stuff!" But it was too late. The woke stuff was already in the movie. Rachel Zegler went off in 2024, and now, here we are. That's how we got here. That kinda says it all, doesn't it? All of that history really dispels the mystery, and I honestly would love to blame Disney for this one, but we're really the reason they continue to profit from all these shoddy-ass remakes. I mean, not me, but y'all. Do you understand? All of you people. All y'all are the reason for this crappy Snow White remake. So the real reason Snow White 2025 is a failure is because Disney failed to learn from their mistakes, to the point where I feel like it's almost my civic duty to put my voice out there into the ether and express my disdain for modern-day Disney. I don't even blame all of this controversy on Rachel Zegler at this point. She's a young girl, and young people are stupid, and they have stupid ideas. She's not the problem with this movie, and I almost feel bad at the amount of hate she receives on the daily due to a frankly mismanaged project pretty much from the jump. The CGI dwarves and removing any and all dwarf representation, as well as any racial or cultural representation for the film, was especially egregious because it made Disney look like hypocrites, feigning support for minority groups, and yet it was all just lip service all along. The only thing worse than virtue signaling is fake virtue signaling. They injected the movie with CGI dwarves and never looked back. This is what Disney had learned from the start. If you make a mistake, you can always just take out your magic eraser and paint in CGI to make it all better again. Classic Disney. Frankly, I think that's worse than anything Rachel Zegler or Gal Gadot contribute to the controversy of this film. I think they're patsies, frankly. The real problem is just how badly the story was mishandled due to what Disney thought people wanted, removing any and all semblance of the original, in combination with the cowardly move of making the dwarves all soulless CGI husks of humanity. And honestly, if they wanted to tell a feminist fairy tale, they should have, with an all-new property. It could have evoked vibes of Snow White without trampling all over the legacy of the original, or the story on which it was based. And look, I'm no Snow White fanboy here, but I'm a strong proponent of preserving art in all its forms, and I'm against politicizing entertainment for the sake of selling out to any social justice mob. It just stinks to high heaven whenever I see it, and it always puts a stain on that film forever. Personally, I have always hated these modern remakes of classic Disney films. We already have the original films, and the live-action ones are never as good, so what's the point? Make a new story. Give these creative voices the freedom to create their own fairy tales, and stop relying on old source material. Modern Disney is a commercial success, yes, but it's a creative failure, and I'm sure some other YouTuber will point out the CEOs and higher-ups that are responsible for this, but I'm just explaining from a fan's perspective why people are tired of modern Disney. The heart of the matter here is people want to discover something new. They want to go on new adventures with new characters. Disney needs to learn that at some point, the gravy train will run dry, just like it did with their Marvel films, and something new must emerge. A change must be made, and it starts, dear viewer, with you. Stop giving Disney your money. Stop going to their shitty movies and buying their shitty merchandise. The only way to really teach Disney this lesson is to walk away. It's time. Let's give our money to new ideas, indie artists, and people with creative vision. Like me, for example, check my links. That's the only way Disney will ever change their ways. Anyway, that's all I have to say in this video. Catch you in the next one, and as always, stay scared. But, that Lilo and Stitch remake actually looks pretty good.